That's sort of the tragedy of it all, because there are some drugs that have some really serious dangers that teens need to learn about. And the whole DARE program, they just lied so blatantly about cannabis that the kids would experiment with cannabis, and then they'd know that none of this was true, and then they'd ignore the messages, some of which were very important, about alcohol, about heroin, about cocaine, about other drugs. And if you're going to do drug education, tell the truth. Don't lie to teenagers. The minute you blow your credibility, it's gone. The teenager's never going to listen to you again. I mean, I don't get where they came up with the idea, let's lie to teenagers about cannabis, and then that'll stop them from using it. It's like the most brainless thing I've ever heard of. And it just completely backfired.
Yeah, and if you are going to be addicted to or leaning on a substance, cannabis is a pretty good option compared to a lot of other things out there, even cheeseburgers.
Yeah, some people do get in trouble with cannabis. There's no question. And no substance is free of any harm. But yeah, no, I mean, I use it sometimes in my practice for harm reduction. I mean, if you could get someone off of alcohol and onto cannabis, that's a big win. I mean, in a perfect world, people use drugs, electively and not in a dependent fashion, not to escape from anything. And we all exercise and eat tofu and use our yoga mats, but we're people and we suffer, and most people need something. And if you could steer people towards, the least harmful substance, that's a huge win. And, harm reduction is a huge belief of mine.
And I think there's something to be said about the healthy exploration of altered states, whether you're using cannabis to achieve that, or meditation, or exercise, or playing with your kids, or the list goes on. And I wonder if you have any thought about that as a physician and a human being, the altered state.
Well, it's funny. There's what I'm supposed to say as a physician, then there's what I really believe. But there's been no society that hasn't had intoxicants. I mean, it's just, and you can make a strong argument that, like, as you say, experimenting with altered states has been part of our cultural and religious history since our very beginning. And the key, I just think this, jihad that we've had against all drugs is just absolutely ridiculous. People should be allowed to experiment, and as long as they're doing it in a responsible way, they're not harming anybody, there's really nothing wrong with it. People are educated about the potential side effects and the harms. And whoever had the idea of criminalizing drugs, that's been absolutely insane. Drugs are not a law enforcement issue. Law enforcement makes everything worse. If people get into trouble with drugs, it should be handled by doctors, nurses, social workers, public health officials, not by law enforcement. I mean, how does it help any situation ever to give people a criminal record? It just leads to more criminality and to desperation, which will make you need to be even more dependent on drugs. You treat people with compassion, empathy, and treatment if they need it. So I think that all drugs need to be legal. We need to educate people so they can avoid the harms. We need to treat people if harms accrue. That would be much more cost effective and much more humane than any possible outcome with law enforcement. And yes, I think part of our nature is to explore. And again, we make all these other drugs illegal, and then people are allowed to use alcohol, which is like the lowest common denominator. Like, I just can't for the life of me understand why people, I mean, my theory is that people use alcohol because cannabis has been illegal. I mean, cannabis is so much healthier, more interesting, and more productive drug than alcohol. And I think that alcohol is just a default because people, again, need something. Again, in a perfect world, we'd all exercise, meditate, and do yoga, but most people need something. And the only default has been alcohol. And I think a lot of people are transitioning to cannabis because it sort of connects you with other people and lifts you up, as opposed to just dulls you and makes you a zombie. So I agree with you about the tendency of people to want to explore altered states. And again, as a doctor, there are healthier ways to do it and less healthy ways. And part of my job is to not be a Puritan or be totally unrealistic and just be like, just say no. And then all that accomplishes is that nobody tells me what they're doing and they do it anyways. That's just dumb. My thing is to foster the lines of communication being open and to encourage people to do it in the healthiest and safest way possible, so that they can grow and flourish and not harm themselves. And if any harms come, to treat them with empathy and compassion. So I agree with you completely.
We've got a pretty good model for that in Portugal, where they decriminalized all substances 20 years ago. And now they have I think the best rates in Europe in terms of least amount of drug overdoses and health issues related to drug use.
Right, and
from my understanding.
We have a spectacular model of how not to do it in the U.S.
Yeah.
Millions of people in prison for no reason, rotting away for nonviolent crimes, huge overdose rates on synthetic opiates. If drugs were legal, nobody would be dying. I don't understand what's so complicated about that. It's only the reality that's making it so toxic. And it's just a big moralistic component to this. Like, people who are addicted are these happy hedonists, but no, they're just miserable people that need treatment. I've been there. I know what it's like. And punishing people is just like the worst thing you could do. It's like adding plutonium onto the fire. And we just need a complete attitude change about this. Portugal's got it right. The US has got it wrong completely.
Yeah.
We should, with humility, just say, we're wrong about drugs from beginning to end. Portugal, what can you teach us? That's what the United States should be saying.
Yeah. The knowledge gaps there are baffling.
Right. And humility isn't the United States' strong point. So
one of its many strong points, humility.